These social constructs of what it means to be a good mother, of what it means to be a perfect mother, they're pretty universal. We get a lot of these messages consistently in society.
Welcome to the Worthy Mother podcast, where we discuss all things identity, self-compassion, and fulfillment within and beyond motherhood. I'm Emily Rose Hardy, a mindset and self-love coach for moms. I am a firm believer that to be able to take care of our children, we must take care of ourselves first. This is not a parenting podcast. No, this is a podcast where we will challenge the societal expectations of what it means to be a mom, demystify the perfect mom myth, and learn to love ourselves. You are worthy, mama. Let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Worthy Mother podcast. It's Emily. Today we are going to be talking about something that has underlied a lot of the conversations we've had here on the Worthy Mother podcast, but something that we also haven't really talked too explicitly about. And that is the perfect mother myth. We are going to be kind of unpacking and pulling apart this idea of the idealized mother, what that looks like in society, the impacts that has on us, and really doing all of this with the goal of allowing us to see that there are these ideals and expectations that we are held to in society that we have very likely taken on as our own. And if we can kind of break that apart and see what those expectations are and really how kind of absurd they are, it might help to release some of the pressure to live up to those expectations. Really taking an explicit look of what is expected of mothers to be considered, quote, good. We can see that, we might not actually believe or align with the values of those expectations in the first place. And so we might be holding ourselves to something that isn't actually important or meaningful to us anyway. So to provide a little context on where I'm coming at from in this conversation, I went through a certification program with Dr. Sophie Brock. She is a motherhood studies sociologist, somebody who's very, very well-versed in understanding the sociology basically surrounding motherhood and understanding motherhood and mothering as social constructs. This is what she studied. She has a doctorate in this, and her work really legitimizes mother issues, right, as something that we can look at and study and understand from a sociological perspective. I am so fortunate to have had her as a mentor through the course of the certification program. And throughout that certification program to become a motherhood support practitioner, we talked a lot about the perfect mother myth and expectations on mothers, because to understand how we can address patriarchal motherhood and how we can support mothers to live without the kind of burden of these expectations, we have to understand what the expectations are and how they kind of encompass the motherhood experience. There's a lot more to that, and I'm not going to get super into it, but I just want to kind of bring to you the experience and knowledge that I have coming into this conversation. It's not just talking about some frou-frou making up what this idealized mother is. This is real, researched, studied content that we're talking about. And so when we can understand this perfect mother, this mythological perfect mother, and understand that this is a real thing that we are exposed to in this world, this expectation of being this perfect mother, that we can kind of start to see that actually might be impacting the way we show up. And if we're feeling guilt and shame in motherhood and the way that we are showing up differently than this perfect idealized mother, when we can understand where that perfect ideal comes from in the first place, it might help to release some of that guilt and shame, which is the whole goal, right? We want to be able to live free of the pressures that aren't really helping us anyway. So really the way I want to have this conversation is just talking about who this perfect mother is and kind of unpacking some of the contradictions within that. It's important to note that the images we get of a perfect mother may look different based on where we are in the world, our cultures, who we have raising us, and who we're exposed to in our personal life. But this kind of idea is pretty universal in a sense. Speaking from the perspective of someone in the United States, I studied under Dr. Sophie Brock, who is located in Australia. And so really understanding it from that perspective, it really is important to put that out there, that that's the perspective we are coming from. There's going to be differences in what it means to be a good mom based on culture. That is true. However, even so, this big idea of what it means to be a perfect mom may also infiltrate different cultures and things like that because it is so prevalent. This idea is so prevalent. And so I think regardless of where you are in the world, if you are tuned into social media, if you are tuned into mainstream media, this narrative of the perfect mom has probably been a part of the things that you've consumed, right? So it really is kind of a universal thing. After we get into what this perfect mother looks like and kind of breaking that down and picking it apart a little bit, I want to introduce you to the 8 rules of good motherhood. And these are rules by Professor Andrea O'Reilly. She is another superpower in the space of motherhood studies. And these rules that she lays out really show what is expected of moms, these rules that we have to follow to be good moms. And we'll again pick those apart, kind of look at them, challenge the idea that these are things that we want to be following in the first place, and really kind of get to the absurdity of these rules. I think this is really helpful just to see what we are expected to do. Again, when we can see what expectations we're being held to, we may feel differently about not meeting those expectations or falling short of those expectations when we realize maybe that's not something I actually want to attain anyway, right? And with all of that, I hope we can walk away then from this conversation with a little bit more insight and a place to reflect from in our daily lives of like, what are we holding ourselves to? What are the expectations we have and why? So before we dive into really looking at the perfect mother myth and this idealized mother image that we tend to be exposed to, I want you to take a moment just to reflect on your perception of the perfect mother. So if you are able to, if you're at home and able to pause and whip out a piece of paper or, take your phone out, open the notes app, I think that's a great idea. It's great to process this. But if you are driving or doing something else where you can't do that, totally fine just to listen along and think about this. But I want you to really think about what the perfect mother looks like in your mind. Imagine the perfect mother. Think about how she shows up for her children. Think about how she shows up in the world and in her other relationships. Think about what her home looks like. Think about her physical appearance. Just imagine this perfect mother. Anything that you see as representing the perfect mother, write it down. And again, these don't have to be things that you necessarily value, but just what is this vision of a perfect mother that you see existing in the world? Because even if you don't necessarily value those things, likely if something's coming up as representative of the perfect mother, that's somewhat ingrained in your being, again, regardless of whether it aligns with your values or not. It's really about what you perceive society as seeing as the perfect mother. So if you are doing this and writing it down, you might want to hit pause here and continue writing, but we'll get into really like thinking about that and talking about the perfect mother. And you'll probably hear that there are things that I'm going to speak to that likely showed up in what you wrote down. Because again, these social constructs of what it means to be a good mother, of what it means to be a perfect mother, they're pretty universal. We get a lot of these messages consistently in society. So now we're going to look really explicitly at this perfect mother myth and who this perfect mother is. And to start things off, I think it's important to acknowledge the kind of demographical pieces that we tend to be presented as this is what the perfect mother looks like. This is who she is. And so it tends to be, right, a mom who is in a heterosexual relationship. She's married, right? She is probably middle class, probably white, probably able-bodied, not disabled, right? Like that sets the foundation for who this woman is. And you can see there, a lot of those things are not in our control and really don't impact whether somebody is going to be a good mother or not. Like it doesn't have anything to do with mothering, but that is this image that we're presented with. And so automatically then, if somebody falls outside of that scope, just by existing in a body that is outside of this idealized image or existing in a relationship that is outside of this idealized image, you can already see how impactful that could be to have this grand perception in our society of what the perfect mother looks like. And automatically, some people just don't fit into that box, right? And then there's other things about this perfect mother that are really important to note. She is fully selfless, fully sacrificing. She always puts the kids first, right? That is so important. The good mother, the perfect mother, always puts her kids first. She is going to be spending all of her time with her children, making sure that their well-being is taken care of. She is putting all of her energy towards her children. She's playing with her children. She is making the most beautiful snacks and meals for her children. She is doing all of these, quote, mothering activities, whether that's the caretaking piece or just the keeping the house clean and the things that we associate in society with the role and job of the mother, right? She is productive 24/7. She is with her kids 24/7. She is the one who is there when they need her and when they don't. She has the perfect relationships, right? Her marriage is thriving. She is showing up for her partner and meeting his needs, right? And likely she has a perfect career as well, because this woman is not dependent on her spouse for financial needs, right? She's also providing for the family. But remember, she is there for her kids 100% of the time, right? She can drop anything on a dime to be there for her kids. And she has the perfect body. She looks great. She's able to take care of herself. She's doing everything she's supposed to do to bounce back. And she has bounced back. That's the perfect mother, right? Anything short of that is seen as possibly even a failure in the eyes of society. We expect moms to have this perfect life and present perfectly while taking care of the kids in a way that is doing it correctly. Her house is perfect as well. She keeps it clean, tidied, organized. That's the job of the mom, right? She is good at all of those things because she's a mother, and mothers are expected to be good at those things. It's important to note, too, that her kids are expected to be well-behaved. The perfect mother has children who are well-behaved and who show up in society the way that we expect them to show up in society. They're good kids, right? The perfect mother has perfect children. And that doesn't leave much room for, neurodivergence or even just like typical development in a child, right? There's no tantrums in the grocery store because the perfect mom wouldn't be taking her kids to the grocery store if they're going to have a tantrum. Who wants to hear that, right? This perfect mother, her kids are always well-behaved. And it's assumed that at home, behind closed doors, they are too. They're being raised in the most ideal way. If she's doing everything right, they will turn out right? Like that's kind of the assumption there. And then probably most importantly, this mother is happy to be doing all of this. She is so happy in her role. She doesn't question her identity. She doesn't question whether she wants to be doing something different. She experiences like this blissful life. She shows up with such ease and grace and happiness in her role as a mother. She is so happy to be doing all of it. There's a sense of fulfillment that she has in her role as a mother and all that comes with it. She isn't resentful. She isn't feeling like she wants more. She isn't wishing that her needs were being better met. She doesn't miss life pre-motherhood. She doesn't question whether she'd be giving more time to herself or anything like that, right? She's just happy in this role. Everything is going right. And there are so many other pieces to this, right? There's probably things that, depending on who you were raised by and in what world you were raised by, there might be things that you could pull in and say, this is what the perfect mother looks like in my family or in my community. And there also may be things in there that don't resonate. But just overall, it's this picture of a woman who is perfect. She has the perfect life. And there's some little things that I want to just pull out of there and just make really clear just how kind of absurd this all is. Because even if we just think about time and time spent with our kids, you can't be 100% present for your kids 100% of the time and also be taking care of yourself and also be having a thriving career and also be pouring all the attention you need to into your relationship and also keep a super tidy home and also cook home-cooked meals every day that are perfectly nutritiously well-balanced. Like even just thinking on a very logistical perspective, that is not possible. If we are giving 100% of our time to our children, they are getting 100% of our time. That doesn't leave any room for anything else. So this doesn't work. This idea doesn't work. And then there's the, other part of it that's less logistical and more just like motherhood. And that role of being a mother is not necessarily all fulfilling to every woman because we are individuals. We are unique individuals. And to expect that every single mother is going to feel like her whole world revolves around her children, not just in the sense of like the decisions she makes and the things like that and making sure they're well taken care of, but in terms of like her identity. To expect that every mother out there is going to be okay with that and feel good about that doesn't leave room for humanity. It doesn't leave room for real people existing and having dreams, having passions, having goals, having mental health that they need to take care of, right? Like it's just not realistic to expect every single woman to be completely 100% fulfilled by motherhood. And even if she is, by some chance, we are human and we have a range of emotions. And so it's absurd that this idea of a perfect mother exists as this perfectly well-rounded, happy human being who doesn't go through the human experience, who doesn't experience very real, normal human experiences. And so something that can be helpful to do, thinking about everything I just shared, but also thinking about your own reflection of what society sees as the perfect mother and maybe what you see and perceive as the perfect mother, to really look at that and think, what if these expectations are, first of all, not realistic? Like it just can't be. And then also, which of these expectations are not actually in alignment with what I value as a mother? Because maybe you value time to yourself. You value time to work out away from your kids, right? That's important to you. Maybe you value your career in a way that you're not going to be the one who is caretaking for your children 7 days a week. Maybe you value having a range of emotions and you think that it's important that we allow space for all emotions, right? You probably do that for your kids. Are you doing it for yourself? Really thinking about picking apart where your values differentiate from this perfect mother can be really helpful in just uncovering it and making it clear that the expectation is not something that's actually aligned with what you want, how you want to show up in your life as a woman and as a mother. So I said I was going to share about the perfect mother myth. Now I want to get into Professor Andrea O'Reilly's 8 rules of good motherhood. I think these rules are really helpful in clearly laying out the rules that are on us to be good mothers, what is expected of us from society. Professor Andrea O'Reilly, who my mentor, Dr. Sophie Brock, studied under, she, again, really has done a lot of work in this area of understanding the sociological construct of motherhood and mothering. And so this is very research-based and really comes from a lot of experience and studies on really the societal expectations of mothers. These are very much not just pulled out of the blue. And as I share these with you, we will talk about really what each of these means. And I'm going to do my own reflection of like, is this something that I value? Because I can acknowledge that this is a message that I have gotten in my life in some way, but is it something that I actually value and that I want to hold myself to? Is this a rule that I want to hold myself to? So rule number 1, children can only be properly cared for by the biological mother. So think about that for a moment. My guess is that the first thing that came up for you is that there are mothers who are not biological mothers raising children. I know for me, that's the first thing that came up. There are adoptive mothers, there are grandparents raising their grandkids, and there are plenty of fathers who are raising their kids, right? There could be a family without a mother, or maybe the father is the one who is staying home with the children while the mom's working. Like there's so many different family dynamics. And so I can acknowledge right off the bat that I disagree with this. It's important that we understand that a child can be taken care of other people outside of the biological mother. But while I can logically say that and reason that through, and I'm sure, again, some of those things are coming up for you as well, I also know that I have received so many messages of like, well, how could you leave the kids, right? When I was working out of the home and going to teach every day, and I had a 1-year-old at home, and people would say things like, well, who's caring for the child? And just questioning that, whether it was the kids in daycare or they're with dad or they're with their grandparents, people who are perfectly capable of caring for my child that I fully trust. We get those messages constantly that as the mother, we are supposed to be the one caring for our child if it's going to be done right. And that puts a lot of pressure on us then to do it, quote, right. So I can kind of see then how this rule has impacted my perception of motherhood, even though it's not something that I necessarily actually believe. Rule number 2, This mothering must be provided 24/7. So the mom not only is the only one who can provide the care for her children, but she must be providing that care for her child 24/7. That doesn't leave room for anything else. Like, again, logistically, it's not possible. I understand that, but I also see so clearly that there's so much pushback on moms who take time for themselves, who take time not at home with the kids to work, to go do something, whatever it is. There's pushback. We should be the ones who are there 24/7. That is an expectation and a rule that is put on us by society. Number 3, the mother must always put her children's needs before her own. This is one that I talk about so much here on the Worthy Mother podcast. There is absolutely an expectation of sacrifice for mothers. It is the expectation that our children's needs will always come first. And that doesn't stop with their basic needs, right? It's not like you need to do everything in your power to make sure your kids are fed and have shelter. It really goes along with making sure that they are getting these activities that they need to do. We're prepping for these activities. We are doing so much to make sure that all of their needs, emotional needs, psychological needs, physical needs, all of it is being met, and we're neglecting our own needs. That's the expectation, right? We're neglecting our basic needs even, but also those more expansive needs of belonging and of doing things that are fulfilling to us. It is the expectation that a mother will always put her child first, always put her child's needs first above her own. And that expectation, just to kind of point this out there, that expectation does not exist for fathers in the same way at all. Rule number 4 is that mothers must turn to the experts for instruction. And oh my goodness, we see this a lot right now with parenting experts who are sharing a lot on social media. And there's some incredible advice out there. Do not get me wrong. I think that education and resources can be really powerful, and we can show up in a way that we want to when we have information and understanding. But there also is kind of this total expectation that mothers will be listening to the experts and making decisions based on what other people say, as though we don't just know some of the things we want to decide for our families just based on our own values and our own upbringing and our own instincts, right? And so I see the beauty in listening to experts and having access to research and information, but also the necessity to be a good mom lying in turning to these experts, turning to people for information, and just the information overload that can come with that, because there's experts saying all different kinds of things, right? We can't just listen to the experts and then get it right. That's not how life works. Rule number 5 of these 8 rules of good motherhood: the mother must be fully satisfied, fulfilled, completed, and composed in motherhood. And this kind of pulls back to what we talked about in kind of dissecting the perfect mother myth, right? Is that it is assumed by society that becoming a mother will completely fulfill you. And I know for me, having the realization that it didn't, that I wasn't completely fulfilled by pouring into my child, that didn't completely fulfill my life, was very hard to take in, because I really did think that it was supposed to just be like, wow, my life has full, complete purpose now and I'm good to go. And then really there was a lot of questioning of like, what do I actually want in life and what do I want for my life? And for me, it really cracked open this door of like looking at my own dreams. That's what motherhood did for me. And so this expectation that it's just supposed to be all fulfilling and we're supposed to be so satisfied and happy in that role, it is so prevalent, and something that I think so many women before they become mothers really feel like is what's supposed to happen. And when it doesn't just automatically happen, that can be really scary. Number 6 is that mothers must lavish excess amounts of time, energy, and money in the rearing of their children. And we hear this a lot, things like moms will spend money on their kids, but they won't spend money on themselves. And that's so true with time and energy as well. It's this expectation that to do anything for ourselves is selfish. We need to be giving constantly to our children. They need everything from us. All our resources go to our children. And really, what that actually leads to is burnout, because if we're not pouring into ourselves in any way, we will be completely drained. We can't keep doing it like that. So for most of us, hopefully that's not what's happening. but it is the expectation. And that's why we get things like mom guilt when we try to do something for ourselves, when we pay to take a workout class, we're not putting that money towards our child, or when we decide we're going to go out of town for a weekend for a girls' trip to get kind of a reset, refresh, and just feel like ourselves for the weekend. There's guilt that comes with that, right? Even if we are making those choices, it's because the expectation is that all of our time, energy, and money will go towards our children and not towards us. Number 7, the mother has full responsibility, but no power from which to mother. And this one just hits. I think this is something that when you really think about that, I'll say it one more time. The mother has full responsibility, but no power from which to mother. It's so true in so many of our lives where we feel and get messages that we are to be completely responsible for our child. It is all on the mother. It is all on you. But you don't actually have the power to mother in the way that you may want to mother from. And you may not even realize what that is. You may not even realize what you value if you haven't stopped to think about it. But there are so many factors to how we have to show up in motherhood and how we're expected to show up in motherhood that it's almost like, hey, this is all your responsibility, but also make sure you do it this way. Make sure you do it this way, and you'll end up with perfect children if you do. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about the responsibility we have and the expectation of a lack of power from society. We are expected not to be able to stand in our power. So don't take this as you don't have power, because here's the thing, is that you actually likely have a lot more power in the way you show up in motherhood and life than you might think or feel like. But then to also acknowledge that there are things that do take away our power. And so just grappling with that and understanding that expectation can be a lot, brings up a lot for me. And finally, rule number 8 of Professor Andrea O'Reilly's 8 rules of good motherhood is that motherhood and child rearing are regarded as personal and private undertakings with no political import. And just how ridiculous this is to understand that it's expected that we will just be quiet and do our mothering and raise perfect little children without acknowledging the fact that there are so many political factors really into how we are able to show up and do our jobs as mothers, right? I mean, even just thinking about something as simple as leave policies in companies where parental leave is very weak. It's something we have a lot of work to do to get our parental leave policies where they need to be for both mothers and fathers, and the impacts that that has on how a mother is able to show up and raise her children and live in her life. It's not private. It's not personal. These are real political issues. And the expectation that it's not is silencing. And it creates this world where it's just like, it is what it is, and we still have to show up. And that's just something that we need to push back on because it's not helpful for anyone. So those are the 8 rules of good motherhood by Professor Andrea O'Reilly. And I hope that just gave you a little peek into kind of what society expects of us, and maybe an opportunity to think about in your own life how you may feel influenced by those rules and how they may actually not be reflective of what you actually believe in the way that you want to show up in motherhood and life. And when we can start to understand that there's a difference there, when we can start to understand that these rules that are in place aren't actually something that we have to abide by, right? They're not real rules. These aren't like rules that if you don't do it, something bad's going to happen. Like, that's not how this works. And so I just think it's really important that we understand where these expectations come from, what the expectations are, make it really clear what we are trying to hold ourselves to so that we can understand, like, it's not actually what I want. It's just kind of absurd. Like, that's what, when I think about all this, that's how it feels. It's like, why am I allowing myself to feel guilt about something that I don't actually value? Right. And there's a lot of grappling that comes with that. There's a lot of like questioning and really trying to get to the bottom of what you value. But I think it's so worth it in terms of just allowing us to live lives that are less kind of burdened by the pressure of these expectations that don't really actually matter to us anyway. So there's obviously like a lot more we could get into here, and we will continue to do that. I hope that listening to this is going to allow you to kind of just start releasing some of those pressures and getting to a place where you're able to move through the world without so much shame surrounding not being able to achieve this standard of perfection that exists out there for us. If you are interested in doing more work on your own personal values and really what you value in motherhood, what you value in the way that you show up as a mother and the way that you show up in life, I am including a link to my Aligned Motherhood workbook in the show notes. It's just a really quick activity for you to kind of start to expose some of your own values so that when you're faced with these expectations and you're trying to make a decision or you're trying to figure out how to move through the world, you can be more aware of your own values and maybe less pulled to those standards of perfection, doing what you think you should do, right? What you quote should do. And we can actually make decisions based on our own values rather than these perfect idealized values. So I would love to know what you thought of this episode. If you have something to say, I would love for you to share it with me. You can go ahead and shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Honestly Emily Rose, or you can share the episode to your stories and tag me. Let me know what you thought. These conversations are so important for us to be having, for us to be able to move through the world without the pressure of these expectations. I mean, that's my mission. That's what I want for us. That's what I want for every mother out there. And so I would love to know how you felt listening to the episode and what kind of came up for you when we're talking about the perfect mother myth and just getting this message to as many mothers as possible. So again, reach out, shoot me a message, share it to your stories, all that good stuff. And we will be back next week. You are worthy, mama.